to the 24th year of the ongoing persecution of Falun Gong practitioners in mainland China perpetrated by the Chinese Communist Party. Today we've got an assembly of some great speakers, people who will share with you their own intimate account of picking up the practice and how it came into their lives and have benefited from it, and some who firsthand experienced the terror of the Communist Party's repression. In addition to that, we also have some people who are taking very good strides at bringing to light the crimes perpetrated by the CCP against innocent Falun Gong practitioners and their families, and what we can do to help put a stop to this persecution once and for all. So today, the first person I'd like to welcome to the stage to speak with you is Mr. Liam O'Neill, President of the Falun Gong Club of Orange County, New York. Liam, please come up.
Thank you, Louis, and thank you everybody for being here. We've got some lovely weather, and you know, when the sun comes out on events like this, I always think, you know, this is a day of mourning. It's a day of sadness, but it's also a day of great hope for humanity, and because more and more people are waking up to what Falun Gong is, what this persecution is, and what it means for the world. I want to tell you a little story about myself. Long distance running, we call that cross country usually, was a large part for me of my teenage years. I ran pretty fast, I won a lot of races, I even broke many records. But it was always what I would call a love-hate relationship. I loved the feeling of running 10, even 20 miles and not feeling tired. I certainly loved winning races. But no matter how fast I was, no matter how many races I won, there were some people somewhere else who were better than me. And I hated that. I hated the pressure that I put on myself because I was never good enough. One day, I was finishing up a long run, and I was crossing an intersection. And coming at me, making a left-hand turn, was a speeding car running through a red light. Things slowed down, and I looked up and I saw this car coming at an unbelievable speed, and I could only think, I'm gonna die. Somehow, narrowly, I escaped its path, suffering only a broken leg. I flipped over. I was laying in the street, and a huge opening in my leg showing blood, broken bone, torn muscle. Strangely, I was very clear-minded and I was very, very calm. I felt that I had been looked after. I felt a profound sense that this calamity that had just been brought upon me was a good thing. And I was right. Long story short, the accident set me on a different path in my life. And about a year later, I started practicing Falun Gong. Falun Gong helped put that car accident and my running career into perspective. I understood why it was a love-hate relationship. I loved winning, but I'd grown obsessed with fame. Falun Gong showed me that this obsession was the source of much stress and much depression in my life. Falun Gong also showed me that indeed, that car accident was mysterious. Perhaps I could have died that day. But instead, perhaps there were benevolent forces unseen at work. Perhaps it was these forces that had protected me from further harm. Perhaps there was a God. Perhaps there was a creator. Or as the Chinese say, three spiritual beings just 3 feet above our head. Falun Gong showed me that suffering in life is more manageable with spiritual faith. Whether it was physical pain from being hit by a car, loneliness that comes from selfish obsessions over fame and glory, heartache that comes from all sorts of losses. Sufferings in our human lives are inevitable, but with a belief in truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance, they're much more manageable. And episodes of suffering may even be turned around to be periods of personal growth. I used to have a great physical endurance as a runner. But as a Falun Gong practitioner, I often tell people that now I have an emotional endurance. I'm able to have a broader heart when dealing with others. I'm able to see their good points, even when I find them disagreeable. I'm able to turn the other cheek more easily. When I'm wronged, I'm able to forgive. Falun Gong helps me see the beauty in humility, the wisdom of gratitude. I'm also able to see lightness in times of dark and hope when I feel despair. Before hearing others speak about the date that brings us here today, July 20th, 1999, when Falun Gong was first persecuted in China, I wanted to share a small story from my own life. Someone who's been transformed profoundly by this practice. And I hope that my words give a little understanding to what Falun Gong is and why we're here today to mark this date. Thank you so much. To our gathering today by New York State Assemblyman Carl Brabenec from the 98th Assembly District. He wrote, "Today I send you this message with a profound sense of solidarity and empathy as we discuss the efforts of Falun Gong practitioners in their valiant fight against Chinese communist oppression. As a descendant of a family who fled the clutches of communist oppression in the late 1940s in former Czechoslovakia to seek freedom in the United States, I understand the gravity of your struggle on a personal level. Like my family, the practitioners of Falun Gong have faced unimaginable challenges under a repressive regime that seeks to suppress their fundamental human rights and freedom of belief. Their peaceful pursuit of truth, compassion, and tolerance has been met with ruthless persecution, reminiscent of the darkest days of communism. He went on, but then Mr. Brabenec concluded, "We must not turn a blind eye to the plight of Falun Gong practitioners in China. Their fight is our fight, and their cause is one of dignity and freedom. Let us stand together across borders and boundaries to be the agents of change that ensure a brighter future for all those people everywhere oppressed by injustice." Thank you, Carl Brabenec, for those kind words. And let me turn the stage over to Louis and Mr. Tim Sun, who will give a brief summary in Chinese of my remarks.
How could something like this happen today? Well, our next speaker is Mr. Ben Maloney. He's from the Falun Dafa Information Center. He's going to come up here and he's going to let you know a little bit about what his organization is doing to help catalog and gather evidence and this information, related information, so that sooner or later, as we all know, those responsible for these atrocious deeds will be held accountable. Ben, would you please come up?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ben Maloney, and I'm the Digital Outreach Director for Falun Dafa Information Center. And since 1999, as an NGO, Falun Dafa Information Center has gathered firsthand information from China and worked with governments around the world, as well as other organizations, to help end the persecution of Falun Gong. Did you know that in China, the number one censored topic is 2 words, Falun Gong? And why is that? Falun Gong, by all accounts, is a simple, peaceful meditation practice whose believers do their best to live with truth, compassion, and tolerance. So why would one of the largest countries in the world spend countless resources to censor and brutally persecute Falun Gong? To answer this question, we have to first understand scale. Falun Gong was introduced to China in 1992, and for 2 years, the founder, Mr. Li Hongzhi, traveled around doing seminars and spreading the practice. And 7 years later, by 1999, Falun Gong had become the fastest growing spiritual practice in Asian history. It grew organically by word of mouth and spread heart to heart in a pre-internet era from 0 to 70 to 100 million practitioners by the Chinese government's own estimates. Riding your bike through any major city in China in the 90s, you'd see thousands of Falun Gong practitioners doing the exercises in parks just like we saw this morning. 1 out of every 13 people in China was practicing Falun Gong, getting healthier, and living by the principles of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. And actually, the government actively supported Falun Gong at that time. On February 14, 1999, an official from China's National Sports Commission, speaking with U.S. News and Report, suggests that as many as 100 million people may have taken up the practice. The official highlights the cost the practice is saving China's national healthcare system, declaring that Premier Zhu Rongji is very happy about that. And the government even invited Mr. Li Hongzhi to teach Falun Gong in the West at the Chinese embassy in Paris in the 90s. So then what happened? There's 4 main things to understand about why the Chinese Communist Party started their persecution of Falun Gong on July 20th, 1999. The first is Falun Gong's massive popularity and rapid growth, which outnumbered that of the CCP's membership. The second is Falun Gong's complete independence from the CCP's control. After all, if you believe in something deep in your heart, that's not something the CCP can take away from you. And the third is that Falun Gong's guiding principles of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance are incompatible with communist and atheist ideology that the Communist Party adheres to, and has tried to destroy traditional values since its inception. And the fourth is that Jiang Zemin, the Politburo leader, was jealous and had deep political motivations that started this persecution. And in fact, when the persecution started, many members of the standing Politburo did not agree with this persecution. And over the course of the last 24 years, Falun Gong practitioners in China have been subjected to some of the worst human rights violations the world has ever seen. Mass imprisonment, torture, killing, and most shocking of all, state-sponsored organ harvesting so that their organs could be sold for profit by the Chinese Communist Party. In the U.S. State Department's Human Rights Report for 2009, it states that some foreign observers estimate that Falun Gong adherents constituted at least half of the recorded inmates in RTL camps, while Falun Gong sources overseas place the number even higher. And this observation is very telling because it corroborates findings in the UN Special Rapporteur that over 50% of all inmates are Falun Gong. However, the 250,000 number should be viewed with suspicion, given that this is the Chinese regime's official reported number, which is undoubtedly low. Perhaps dramatically so. In fact, the Laogai Foundation estimated that there were 3 to 5 million practitioners in China's labor camps in 2010. Which, using this estimate, there would have been 1.5 to 2.5 million Falun Gong practitioners in labor camps in 2010 alone. And since early 2000, the use of torture on Falun Gong detainees has been widely documented by major media, human rights organizations, and the United Nations. There are at least 100,000 cases of torture documented by Minghui.org, and reason to believe that the true number is several times higher. In 2006, the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, Manfred Nowak, commented that in 66% of all torture cases in Chinese detention camps, Falun Gong practitioners were the victims. Most tragically of all, there are over 5,000 documented cases of Falun Gong. Most tragic of all, there are over 5,000 documented cases of Falun Gong practitioners dying as a result of torture and abuse in police custody since July 1999. You just heard from Lydia, whose father was one of them. Though the true number of deaths is widely believed to be much, much higher. And most gruesome of all is the barbaric practice of state-sponsored organ harvesting. Estimates from multiple separate independent reports indicate that hundreds of thousands of Falun Gong practitioners may have been killed in order to extract their vital organs, which are used to fuel a booming organ transplant business in China. The China Tribunal's judgment in 2020 noted forced organ harvesting has been committed for years throughout China on a significant scale, and that Falun Gong practitioners have been, and probably the main, source of organ supply. Nearly a quarter century after its launch, the Chinese Communist Party's persecution of Falun Gong believers remains one of the largest and most severe human rights crises in China today. The CCP's pursuit of Falun Gong practitioners, however, extends far beyond China's borders. Physical assaults in Chinatowns, illicit diplomatic pressure upon local officials, and surveillance on students on university campuses are just some of the tactics used by the Chinese regime to malign and silence Falun Gong in the United States and in countless countries around the world. In fact, recently, the FBI charged 2 Chinese nationals for working directly with the Chinese Communist Party to try and bribe who they thought was an IRS official out of the New Windsor, New York office to audit a Falun Gong nonprofit in New York. So the long tentacles of the Chinese Communist Party persecution have reached not far from where we stand today. Despite the CCP's massive investment in crushing the practice, Falun Gong survives and even thrives in China and globally, bringing health, hope, and peace to tens of millions of people. There are an estimated 20 to 40 million people practicing Falun Gong in China today who are actively engaged in civil disobedience activity. And in China, rights lawyers courageously represent Falun Gong clients, colleagues display kindness, and even some police are sympathetic. And around the world, ordinary citizens and government leaders, even right here in Orange County, condemn the persecution and have imposed sanctions on Chinese officials. And so, while the dangers facing Falun Gong practitioners in China remain serious, even as I speak here today, there are things you can do to help. Visit our website, faluninfo.net. Follow us on social media, and be the voice for the voiceless. Share the stories and horror experienced by Falun Gong practitioners, and help shed light on this terrible ongoing atrocity. Remember, as the saying goes, sunlight is the best disinfectant. Thank you for listening.
Talking about the world's second largest economy, completely authoritarian, and virtually unaccountable to anybody. What can we do? There's something out there that terrifies the CCP way more than guns, bombs, militaries. It's the truth, and it's the truth being presented to people that has resulted in a phenomena of Chinese citizens stepping forward and saying, I quit. I'm done with you guys. You guys don't represent me, no matter what you say. And today we're lucky to have with us Arlene Richards, who is going to read a speech that was prepared from the organization that is keeping track of and encouraging this movement known as Tuidong in mainland Chinese society. Tweedong movement is Chinese people reclaiming their freedom and, in a sense, reclaiming their identity and saying, this is not me. I renounce all ties and affiliation with this party. I want nothing to do with it. And believe me when I tell you, the CCP and its officials, those in power, are absolutely terrified of it like nothing else. Arlene, would you please come up here and give us an update as to today's Tweedong movement?
Greetings, everyone. Even though the persecution of Falun Gong continues, we can see great changes happening in China. 24 years of persecuting Falun Gong has brought the Chinese Communist Party to the brink of collapse. Today, I bring great news to my friends here. The Tweedong movement has reached a milestone yet again. 415 million brave Chinese have quit the CCP and its affiliated organizations by officially registering at tweedong.org. We thank the courageous volunteers in mainland China for spreading the truth and risking their lives. We thank the global volunteers, including many volunteers present today, for tirelessly calling into China and using other means to persuade Chinese people to quit the CCP. The fruits of their efforts are the 415 million hearts and souls registered on the tweedong.org website. These 415 million men and women are the hope for a new China. The Tweedong movement started with a 2004 publication known as the 9 Commentaries of the Communist Party. It is a movement of spiritual and conscientious awakening. It is a historical movement that shows 415 million Chinese people from all walks of life desire a life of freedom and justice. The Tweedong movement is the most peaceful and effective way of correcting the fundamental problems facing China today. The Tweedong movement is the most peaceful and effective way to disintegrate the CCP, an evil force that destroys humanity. The Tweedong movement provides for forgiveness and compassion. We believe the Tweedong movement is a blessing from the Holy Creator to the Chinese people, and therefore to the whole world. In June 2020, the Tweedong Center initiated an End the CCP petition drive to raise awareness of the CCP's global threat. In other words, the initiative is meant to shed light on the CCP's damage to human rights and freedoms around the world. So far, more than 3.6 million people have signed on. This shows that we are not alone. It shows that people everywhere can identify humanity's common enemy in the CCP. I would like to call upon the entire international community to support the Tweedong movement. Support the Chinese people's desire for freedom. Let's together end the CCP's brutal persecution of Falun Gong, its persecution of the Chinese people, and its persecution of all people everywhere. It is time to end the evil CCP. Thank you very much.
Some headlines in the mainstream media over the last several months, some pretty ridiculous things, that there's been arrests made by the FBI and local law enforcement of sort of impromptu police stations here in the United States on behalf of the CCP. Also, there was an arrest of 2 people who were thinking they were speaking to an IRS agent trying to get the nonprofit status of a Falun Gong entity revoked. It turns out it was an undercover FBI agent, so they were arrested and are set to be prosecuted. So many of us probably are aware that the CCP doesn't just do these bad things in China, but they will do anything and everything they can outside of China to advance their agenda of suppression and intimidation. Is there anything that we can do? There is. Luckily, here in Orange County, we've had a grassroots organization pop up. community-based organization known as the Mount Hope Chinese Association. And one of the things they have done is organize quick seminars to help educate the American public about the threat the CCP poses us right here, right in our small town backyards. Today I'd like to welcome on the stage Mr. Chris Chung. He's going to give us a brief summary and update on the Mount Hope Chinese Association and their activities. Chris, please come on up. Information to you that hopefully you will take with you today and share with others, because what you've seen in front of you and what you've heard today, it's important that we act as individual mobile media and let the friends of ours and coworkers and neighbors of ours know what they don't. That goes a long way in helping put an end to this persecution. So ladies and gentlemen, here is Dr. Wang Jiwen of the World Organization to Investigate the Persecution of Falun Gong. Dr. Wang? Friends, thank you. That concludes today's rally. As I had said a little earlier, upon returning home today, please share the details of what you heard and experienced here today with your coworkers, with your friends, with your neighbors. It's important that we not forget the pain and suffering of those in China and enjoy the freedom and convenience we have living here in the luxury of the United States to shrug off their plight. It's our moral duty to stand up against this persecution, and at the very least we can talk about it and expose it and make sure people are aware. For those of you who came from China, I want to personally thank you. I was born here in a very privileged life, living in American freedom. I didn't appreciate it the way I do today until I met you and heard your stories and had to secondhand experience the plight that you endured under the communist totalitarian regime of the CCP. By all means, it's wonderful to have you here in our community. You should definitely hold your heads high with dignity. We very much appreciate having you here. For all of you, please go enjoy the beautiful weather today. Have a great weekend and thank you for showing up.